So first of all, it's really good to meet you, man. I don't know how I found your videos, but I want to say it was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. But you've become one of my favorite COD content creators. Your videos are always so polished,
I appreciate that.
and consistently polished too. So I think you got a really good thing going on YouTube right now. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, when did you get into content creation? How did you get into content creation? What made you wanted to get started?
So I got into it, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, roughly. And at the time, it was basically for like tip guys. It was basically just like T Martin, Drifter, maybe a few others. And I just felt like there was room for more. So I wanted to try it out and mainly did it for like public speaking practice. And it just started taking off and never looked back and ended up doing it full time. And yeah, my channel is mainly just breaking down Call of Duty mechanics, some tips here or there, but I've transitioned away from that a little bit, partially because of skill-based matchmaking, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's mainly just breaking down gameplay mechanics.
When did it start to when did you start to pursue it full time? When did it start to take off for you?
Black Ops 3's life cycle. That's when it really started blowing up.
And were you doing the gun guides back then?
No, not at the time. I was trying to stay out of Drifter's way at the time and do my own thing and be completely separate. I started the gun guides in Infinite Warfare because Drifter stopped doing them and people were asking for it. And then people liked my format so much, so I just kept doing it.
I get anxiety when I watch your videos because it must take so long. It must take you so long to do those videos.
Oh yeah.
How many hours do you think you put into a single gun guide?
It's harder at the beginning of the year. So usually my first gun guide would be about 50 hours of work. But once I get sort of a template and a flow going throughout the year, because it's a different template every year, then I can usually knock them out in about 8 hours or so.
That's not too bad. I actually kind of expected it to be a little bit longer there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty efficient with my time, or I try to be at least.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do outside of content creation? Because I mean, you work a lot. Like, do you take days off? Do you have hobbies? What do you do?
I just recently started taking Sundays off, or I might just stream on Sundays, but it's still at least 6 videos a week.
Mm-hmm.
And not a whole lot of free time outside of it. Just spend time with my girlfriend and just sort of hang out.
Nice. How long have you guys been together?
About a year now, or a little bit less than a year, I guess.
Cool, man. If you can make it to the 2-year mark, that's, I think, when you're on solid footing. Because like you can do 2 years of honeymoon stuff, but then once you get past the 2 years, that's when you get really tested. So you're on a good track. That's great.
Yeah, congrats on the engagement, by the way. I saw that on Twitter.
Thank you, man. Yeah, we're both very happy. Is she into gaming too? Does she like fully support you in everything you do, I assume?
Fully supports me, but not super into gaming. No, she plays like Nintendo games, and that's about it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, listen, as much as, you know, we can talk about your girlfriend forever, I think the main reason why I wanted to ask you to come on is because you seem to be one of the more knowledgeable people in this community in terms of like how the game functions on the back end. Obviously, we're talking about Call of Duty today. And I've had some takes, some skill-based matchmaking takes as of late that some may consider to be spicy and have provoked sometimes very angry response from other creators and some of their followers, which I love, by the way. I think it's awesome and hilarious. So I wanted just to have just sort of like a measured, tempered adult conversation about this kind of thing. I thought you would be a good person to come on. Do you want to kick this conversation off with some of your general thoughts? Because I wrote a few things down.
Yeah, I did as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not on this super extreme end. I think we're actually going to agree on a lot of things when it comes to skill-based matchmaking. I think some of the way you tweeted some things may have been specifically worded to evoke a certain response out of people to get that controversy going.
What?
That was my impression of some of the tweets, but I'm fairly moderate. I do think skill-based matchmaking is important to some degree. But I think Call of Duty is a very different game compared to other games. I think skill-based matchmaking, since Modern Warfare 2019, that's where things like immediately there was like a switch that they flipped, and yeah, it's something I no longer accept very much. Like I kind of tolerate it, but my playtime the past 2 years or so is significantly less than before. And it pretty much destroyed playing with a certain group of friends that I used to play with basically every night. because they're a pretty significantly different skill level to me. And when they play with me, they just don't like my lobbies. They can't get any kills. Whereas when they play on their own, they say it's a way better experience, totally different game for them. That's one of my bigger arguments against it, and one of the most frustrating things, because like I want to play with my friends, but they don't want to play with me. Yeah, there's a lot of other detail I'm sure we can get into as we go through the conversation, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm not completely against it.
It's interesting that you mentioned Modern Warfare 19 as the starting point, because for me, when I noticed a pretty big change, it felt like Advanced Warfare was the game that really kind of kicked it off, because that was the game, like, I would typically get like around a 2.0 KD. I mean, that's just one metric, but typically that would be like the average that I got with games. And Advanced Warfare, or with Advanced Warfare, it went down to like a 1.5 or a 1.6. Now that could be because there were jetpacks in the game, and maybe I'm just a better boots on the ground player than a jetpack player, but Black Ops 3 came around and my KD was actually quite good in that game. I think it was like a 2.3 or whatever.
Yeah. See, I didn't mention that because back in those days, I didn't do any like detailed testing with Advanced Warfare. So I agree. Something did feel different in that game compared to the others as well, but I still don't think that was the same type of system. I don't think that was so much engagement optimized matchmaking as more of a true skill-based matchmaking, but turned up from the previous games and the games that followed it.
Can you talk a little bit about the distinction between team balancing, engagement optimized matchmaking, and skill-based matchmaking? Because there may be some misunderstanding with what these terms mean.
Yeah, okay. Team balancing is not matchmaking, because matchmaking is what happens when you get players into the lobby. Team balancing is what happens once the players are already there. And that's always existed in COD, particularly in Treyarch games. It tends to be stronger. And a common experience is if you're a very high skill player, like significantly better than most people you'd ever run into, in order to balance the team out, in order to balance that artificial like hidden elo score in the background, they typically stack your team with the worst players in the lobby. And even then, your skill level of your team is likely going to be higher than the skill level of the other team, because it's not possible to make up for that skill difference. But it can be really frustrating.
If you're solo queuing, you mean, right?
Yeah. Talking as a solo player for that one.
Okay.
But then skill-based matchmaking is what I actually am totally fine with to some degree, where it has your hidden elo score in the background. You can't see it at all, but it gives you an indication of how good of a player you are, essentially. It's not just your kill death ratio. It's a common misconception. Not just score per minute. It's a bunch of values that go into this. And it just tries to at least somewhat match you with similarly skilled players, at least to some extent. There is going to be some degree of freedom, but like with that, like the top players are generally not going to run into the bottom players, but they're like top players will play against average players fairly often.
When you say there are other factors besides score per minute and kill death ratio, what do you mean? Like, what are those other factors, and how do you know this? Like, is this public information or?
No, we don't know the exact factors that go into it. But through all the testing that we've done, it was primarily, I'm talking more recent Call of Duty games. This is getting more into the engagement optimized, but it was more so recent performance. That's what you're matchmaked on, but like more than any like career stats or anything like that. It looks at your recent performance, and that's where we're starting to see fairly strong correlations when it comes to the matchmaking. But yeah, we don't know every single stat that goes into it. There have been a lot of patents filed that discuss various elements that could potentially go into it. And that's why we're guessing that there are many other factors that go into it. It could be how much you move in a match. It could be, I don't know, your accuracy. Like there's a bunch of stats that could play into that, but I don't know for sure. It's obviously not public data.
Okay, and then so that last little bit that you're talking about in terms of recent performance, that is engagement optimized matchmaking?
Yeah, at least to some extent, that is more engagement optimized. And the way that I see it, at least, and like this is based off my data, this is sort of my interpretation of it. It's not necessarily exactly how it is, but to me, it feels more like recently what they're using in Call of Duty is kind of like a slot machine algorithm, where they're trying to control the highs and lows for you in the experience. So if you have a series of bad games, they're going to give you a good game. They're going to put you into an easy lobby, so then you can feel really good about that. And then you're going to be chasing that high over and over again. And it's a cycle that they try to maintain.
Yeah.
But again, like we don't have perfect data on that, and that's something that it's kind of hard to get perfect data on. And their algorithms are definitely all hidden server side, so you can't really access that stuff.
It could also be the case that sometimes you're just having like a shitty day. Like sometimes you're in a bad mood. You had a shitty day at work. You didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Maybe you didn't eat all that well. And, all these different factors can affect how you play the game. And with something like EOMM, that would help people in that spot as well, because it wouldn't be based solely on your career stats. It would be based on how you're playing that day, and then would quote unquote optimize your experience that day. So if you're playing like a shitty player, you're going to get shittier lobbies. So I think there is an argument to make for that, just in that regard, but I don't want to get bogged down too much with that just yet. I wrote down 8 premises. Okay. I thought maybe we could go through these premises and then you can just sort of tell me your reaction to these. If that's a okay starting point for you, then we can do that. Okay. So the first premise is we measure a game's health by player retention. The longer a player that players stay on, the quote unquote healthier the game is. Would you take any issue with that kind of a characterization?
No, not at all. I would like to talk about it a little bit later. I think there are a lot of other factors that are at play that are often not considered because things changed so drastically with Modern Warfare 2019 outside of matchmaking as well. But yeah, we can get into that later if you'd like.
No, we can get into that now if you want. And okay. just so there's I don't want to dominate the conversation because there's 8 of them. So
yeah, so player retention, I'm sure, is like their stats on the back end. They've got tons of data that they're working with. And yeah, I bet their player retention is higher than it's ever been, especially with Modern Warfare 2019. But the problem I have is, like I said, a bunch of other things changed at the exact same time that they significantly changed matchmaking. And therefore, we don't know to what extent each factor is contributing to that. I'm sure the matchmaking does contribute to it to some extent, but I don't know how much of an extent that is. So one thing I've got written down here is the seasonal leveling system that they brought in. This prevents the really heavy grinders from basically beating the game and unlocking everything early on and then being bored for the rest of the year and not playing it. Yeah. And it keeps people coming back every season. They're coming back to complete new challenges, unlock all the new content, way more than they ever would in the past when we just got map packs. Yeah. And Modern Warfare 2019, I thought was a pretty significant departure from the rest of the series. It was a very fresh take on the game. It was a brand new engine. It looked visually very different from Black Ops 4. And there was a lot of nostalgia baked into the Modern Warfare franchise. A lot of fans really loved that series, and we hadn't had one since 2011, I believe, was Modern Warfare 3. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different reasons why players would stay on. I'm not suggesting that skill-based matchmaking is the only reason that players are staying on longer. But I am suggesting that they definitely have teams of analysts and data collectors that study these points, these data sets, and know exactly or know how to predictably raise people's player retention by using something like a more finely tuned skill-based matchmaking. Sure. Yeah. Okay, yeah, and on average, I think when you look at like the majority of the player base and stuff, absolutely, I'm sure that has helped. And yeah, I don't deny that at all. I don't think that is necessarily great for the long-term health of the franchise. That has yet to be seen, I guess, because the really hardcore fans, they'll stick through it, and they have been sticking through it for the past few years and still complaining about it constantly, but still buying the game every single year. I wonder when it will eventually reach that tipping point where those players are really fed up with it and finally take off and move on to other things. And that was another part too with my like why Modern Warfare did so well. There was just a lack of viable direct competitors at the time that were like an arcade style or just more of an arena style shooter that at least somewhat competed with Call of Duty, like outside of battle royales and stuff. Yeah. So I think that's sort of kept a lot of the players around because there's just nothing better to play. So they're still buying it. They're still playing it. I'm interested to see what happens this year with a bunch of new big AAA shooters coming into the market and what that will do for the players that have been really sick of skill-based matchmaking and if they're finally going to be able to move on now. I think we just have yet to see that, and I'm interested to see what the results end up being. Like, I might be wrong, I might be right. I don't know.
Well, it didn't sound like you were staking a position one way or the other. You were just saying maybe it's possible that people could leave it for a different game that maybe didn't.
That's the thing. Like, I'm not super strong one way or the other here. I don't like it, and I'm interested to see where it goes.
I would be skeptical of skill-based matchmaking being the reason why players would find a different game for a couple different reasons, but like mainly the main reason why I would be skeptical is that there aren't going to be any AAA MP arcade style 6v6 shooters moving forward that don't have skill-based matchmaking. I
don't think there are many that have this style of engagement optimized matchmaking to this extreme. I think a lot of people can accept, especially more competitive shooter with less skill gap reducing elements in it, or shooters that have true skill-based matchmaking where it's actually based on more of a long-term skill ranking, so you get more of a smoothing effect over time. You're not seeing such a massive discrepancy from lobby to lobby. And I think people are more willing to accept that compared to COD's current system where it seems like they're getting thrown all over the place.
Yeah, maybe we'll just have to see on that one. It's hard to speculate.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the premise 2 is skill-based matchmaking leads to, on average, is like, this is a word I'm going to be using a lot, so I think a lot of people have a hard time seeing outside of their own experience. So if they're not having a good time with the game, if friends aren't having a good time with the game, that means nobody's having a good time with the game. And I think that's a fatal flaw in the analysis of many people when they discuss skill-based matchmaking, is that inability.
Totally agree with you there.
Right. Okay. So skill-based matchmaking leads to, on average, higher player retention, both long-term and short-term. Activision knows this. That's why it exists despite major social media backlash. It seems like skill-based matchmaking is trending on Twitter like every other month, and yet it's not gone anywhere for the last few years. I mean, I think that should tell you that there's a reason why it's there. What this tells you very clearly is that on average, people are enjoying their MP experience more, and they're staying on longer. You, the listener to this discussion, I'm talking to the viewers right now, may not be having a better experience than you were 5 years ago, but you are not the norm. If this is the case for you, you're probably an above median level player. You agree with that?
I agree with that, but I do also want to state that I feel it's extremely important to keep the more dedicated, loyal fans, which tend to be us, the guys online talking about things and that care about these issues and that are even aware of these issues to begin with. I'm worried long term for the franchise because of this, because I feel like they are pushing a lot of us away. And again, like, we'll have to wait and see how things play out over the next couple of years, especially. But I think they're more focused on short term. I don't think they're really looking at these algorithms and thinking super long term. I think they're thinking short term because that's what corporations tend to do. It's quarterly earnings. That's what matters. They want to focus on everything quarterly. And I'm worried the long term health of the franchise will suffer because of this. And I've even been seeing, like, a lot of the new games that are coming out, they're talking about skill-based matchmaking. Splitgate came right out and they were explaining their matchmaking systems and how they're going to be tuning and tweaking it. And like, Battlefield's likely not going to have skill-based matchmaking. I hope they don't find a way to squeeze that in there somehow. But I think there's going to be a lot of great alternatives that are going to pull people away long term. And if you see the game on Twitch right now, even Vanguard over the beta, you would think there'd be way more viewership and everything. But the really dedicated gamers out there, we're caring less and less about Call of Duty, and it's becoming more and more laughable, I guess. And people are gearing up to move on to other games, I feel.
Well, is that an accurate thing to say, that they're caring less and less about Call of Duty, when the reality is that a lot of these players are probably playing Warzone now? I mean, BRs are a much bigger draw in terms of both players and viewers than traditional MP. It's still a relatively new genre. Probably like 5 years old at this point, 6 years old. I mean, that's pretty new. It's a lot more fresh. The tech improved quite a bit over the years to allow for 150 player games. So, Warzone itself has skill-based matchmaking as well. So, it's hard to, when you say like it's driving players away from COD, it's like, well, maybe COD for some of them, but COD multiplayer, but is that a result of skill-based matchmaking, or is that just simply because BRs are just more popular at this point?
I think it's largely, at least to some degree, it would be a noticeable degree as well. It's pushing people away. I know a lot of my people that are commenting on my videos, or they're commenting on Twitter, or even in your chat right now. They would love to be playing COD multiplayer. They miss the traditional COD 6v6 multiplayer in the state that it used to be in. Many of them felt sort of forced to move over to Warzone, or they played Warzone and loved it, but they probably would be playing more COD. I don't know. Like COD multiplayer. When I say COD, I'm always talking about multiplayer.
Okay, yeah.
Warzone,
Sure.
I just call it a different game, essentially.
Okay. I don't know. It makes this part of the conversation kind of tricky because you and I don't really have access to the kind of numbers, like what percentage of people that stopped playing MP went over to Warzone. I would speculate that while I think you're probably right that some of the players have been pushed away from traditional MP by skill-based matchmaking, I would be willing to bet like decent money that probably most of the players that switched over to Warzone did so because it's, more fun for them. But
sure, and free to play. Yeah, obviously.
And it's free. Yeah,
it's very popular. It's great.
Yeah, these things are unknowable, so I guess we can just leave it at there. My third premise is skill-based matchmaking on average leads to more balanced lobbies, which leads to a fairer experience for everyone. On average, of course. Though obviously no matchmaking system could ever be perfect and create an enjoyable experience for every single player, every single match. Fairness is something that any responsible publisher or developer will pursue because a lack of fairness can and does turn a lot of players away. And at the end of the day, until the Marxists come in and start the revolution, this is a business, and as such, they will pursue profits. And the more players playing, and the longer that these players are playing, the more these studios will earn.
Okay. Fairness in matches, I don't necessarily agree fully with. Maybe if we're talking averages, for the casual players, they're getting stomped less by the higher skill players that aren't in their lobbies. The lower skill players are probably getting stomped just as hard because there's so many people exploiting the matchmaking and it's super easy to do. My big thing when it comes to fairness, and this is something that I've experienced, it could be partially due to my region, but my connection experience is significantly different. Anytime I've done any testing with my bot account, which I just use in custom matches to shoot at basically for videos, when I do skill-based matchmaking testing with that account, I'm up in Canada, and on that account, on average, I get about a 50 ping. And then on my main account, I can often get that 50 ping, like when I play Cold War, for instance. But there are far more instances where I will be bumped up to 100 ping. It literally doubles my ping. And if you watch me stream, for instance, you'll often see me playing on about 100 ping. Whereas the moment I switch over to my bot account, 50 ping, lobby after lobby, nearly every single game. And I don't know how to justify that as anything but the matchmaking system having an effect on connection, because I'm playing on the same network, same time of day. All of my testing, I tried to control for as many variables as possible. And if that's happening to me, it might not be happening to everyone, especially if you live close to a server. It's likely going to lock you into that one server, and I don't live close to a server. But you have to also think about the connection of other people that are in your lobbies. So you might have a great connection, but in that lobby that you're playing in, it may be pulling people from out of region like myself who have a higher ping, and that higher ping is going to impact your experience with the game as well, potentially negatively, because it can be a negative experience playing on a low ping against somebody that has a high ping in Call of Duty with the way they handle their lag compensation.
Do you live in a populous area? Do you live near or in a big city?
Fairly populous, yeah. I live near Edmonton. Problem with that is there are no servers up here.
Okay. So in your case, peer-to-peer might actually have been better because it might have matched you up with somebody that was closer. But now that we're doing the dedicated servers, it's maybe a little bit. So I mean, how is it not the case that the switch to dedicated servers is the thing that's hurting you more than the actual skill-based matchmaking?
Because I get pulled away from my ideal region, and I can only assume that that's down to the matchmaking due to the testing I've done. I'll admit it hasn't been like a full-on scientific study, but it was something that was repeatable. I did it over and over again, and consistently I was getting a better connection on my bot account compared to my main account. And I have a NetDuma, so I can monitor which servers I'm connecting to, and I can see that on my main account, I frequently get pulled over to more Eastern servers, whereas on my bot account, I'm constantly on Western servers. So I'll connect to, I think, like the Bay Area servers, wherever they are there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like just my own anecdotal experience. I live in the Los Angeles area, which is obviously like the most populous area in the United States. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, I
obviously
doubt you'd ever get pulled out of region.
probably not. No, unless I'm playing with like Hector or something, who's in Texas,
Yeah.
or if I'm playing with a friend who's on the East Coast, then it might put us in.
Yeah,
a
and that's
central
something
server.
you have to expect playing with other people. Yeah.
But my anecdotal experience, not just from my time living in Los Angeles, is that the connections that I have in Call of Duty have consistently gotten better and better and better. Like, I think people have rose tinted glasses when they look back at COD 4 and Modern Warfare 2. There were a ton of problems with connection in those games. Like, you would regularly have host migration. Before you had host migration, you would regularly have the lobby just shut down if the host quit out of the game. I would get into 2-bar lobbies constantly. I lived in, this is when I was living in a city that was like an hour north of San Francisco, but it was all peer-to-peer back then. But like my experience with dedicated servers has been like immeasurably better than peer-to-peer. I also recognize that, like your mileage may vary and your experiences are going to be different depending on what region you live in and that sort of thing. But it would shock me if on average, players were getting worse ping now with stricter skill-based matchmaking than they were like 10 years ago. I have to believe, and there's no way to prove this, but I have to believe that more players are just getting better connections these days. So
this is where one of my arguments against skill-based matchmaking, like I've said, I don't want skill-based matchmaking completely removed, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and there's not enough talk about those areas where things could be improved. And the one huge thing I would love to see in Call of Duty is the ability to choose your region and your server center when you log into the game. Just like with like Apex Legends, for instance, you can pick which server location you're going to connect to, and it will find you a match. If you're playing solo, at least, it will find you a match in that server location no matter what. We don't have that ability in COD. I don't have that control. I could force it with my NetDuma, but that's technically exploiting matchmaking if I were to do that in COD.
If you were to do that, wouldn't that negatively? I mean, I agree with you. I want to think about the cost of that too, because if you allow players the option to choose which region that they're going to play in, wouldn't that affect matchmaking times? Like, wouldn't some regions get slow, like faster matchmaking times, and others would be slower queues?
Well, there's another thing. Provide an option. Say you want to choose your server location, and it can come up with a setting that says this may negatively impact your matchmaking time. I'd be perfectly willing to accept that. I would wait longer for a better connection match for sure, or offer the ability for them to just pick the fastest connection and let it match you out of region. I think Black Ops 2 had a matchmaking little modifier that you could check off for a best connection or fast connection. So it's one of my little solutions, at least, or something that would at least alleviate the skill-based matchmaking issues that I have.
I agree with that. I think that would be good. So you're not going to find any disagreement with you there. Giving people the option to choose the region that they play in would be very nice. So yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
All right. So my next premise is skill-based matchmaking is never, ever, ever going away. It will be baked into every AAA game with MP moving forward. There are going to be a few exceptions here and there, like Destiny 2, for example. I know that they changed the way that they did it. Now they have skill-based matchmaking in Trials, if I'm not mistaken, but they do team balancing in regular PvP. Do you know offhand if I'm correct there?
I've never really been into Halo and stuff, so I just don't really know.
Okay. I think that's how it works. But you mentioned, somebody in the chat mentioned Battlefield, and you mentioned that Battlefield won't have skill-based matchmaking. That wouldn't surprise me necessarily if it's like a big game, like a big team battle. Because obviously, if you're going to try to do like stricter skill-based matchmaking with like 140 players in one match or whatever, that's going to have like severe consequences on the queue times, I would assume. Or maybe I'm wrong about that, because
depends.
Yeah,
like Warzone handles it fairly well, and they still have relatively strict, like considering the number of players in a lobby, it's relatively strict skill-based matchmaking. Obviously, like, it can't be super strict with that many players, but there is a very clear difference between an average 1.3 KD lobby and an average 1 KD lobby.
Right. Yes. And
so Battlefield could do something.
Somebody in the chat mentioned that that Battlefield uses like server browsers, so you can select specific servers. So that would entirely negate skill-based matchmaking altogether. It would be interesting to know if you just hit quick play or whatever, if they actually do use some kind of matchmaking. Like, I think it would surprise me if there was like none whatsoever, but that is a very different experience. But for the most part, I'm talking about like traditional sort of 6v6 arcadey type shooters, like the sort of genre that we're talking about, and BRs, I'll say BRs as well. Skill-based matchmaking is not going away.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's good to some extent.
Therefore, any discussions about pressuring Activision or other publishers to remove it altogether is pointless. The discussion should be centered around transparency, proper rewards through a ranked playlist. And you actually helped me to wrap my head around how having a ranked playlist would relate to skill-based matchmaking. Like, I was making the case that, and I still believe this to a certain degree, but I was making the case that many of the people complaining about skill-based matchmaking today would still complain tomorrow if they added a ranked playlist. But many wouldn't, because you would have something to actually work towards. And I think that there's merit to that argument. So the discussion should be centered around transparency, proper rewards through a ranked playlist, or how to best tune the algorithm. Anything else is just pointless noise that will lead to nowhere. I'm talking specifically to the people that are like, just get rid of skill-based matchmaking altogether. Those people are useless. They're not accomplishing anything. It's a pointless discussion. It is here to stay, is my premise here.
Yeah, I agree with you there completely. It's one of the reasons I decided to come on today, because I wanted to have a more reasonable discussion about it, and not just two people yelling at each other saying it definitely needs to stay exactly how it is, and then the other person yelling and saying no, it needs to get eliminated completely. I just don't think that should be the case. It's not productive at all.
Some people were expecting bloodshed with this conversation. Like, you always struck me as like such a drama-free, non-confrontational person. And I saw some of the replies of the tweets. They're like, he's going to fucking destroy you, bro. And I was like, hey, what are you expecting with this conversation right now? People get more emotional about the conversation around skill-based matchmaking than they do about politics. I have never triggered so many people in all my years on the internet, including the times where I was heavily covering politics, like I did with the skill-based matchmaking takes. It's quite interesting. I mean, they fucking get visceral, like a visceral anger comes up within them.
What I always try to focus on is looking for solutions and maybe some potential compromises to make the more dedicated, loyal fans that feel like they're being alienated at least not feel like they're being so alienated. Like, I've got a list here of a few things that I feel would significantly improve that. If you don't mind me just going through it real quick.
Please, yeah.
Okay, first thing, bring bootcamp playlist back. I think that's a great way to introduce people into the game. In that playlist, mix bots in, so it allows them to get a feel for things a little bit better. Take out any form of high streaks or nukes, so you don't have reverse boosters coming in and just trying to drop nukes on noobs in combat training, or like people that are that maybe make like a Smurf account or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be great. So make that go for the first, 20, 30 levels to be able to access that. That will let people get their footing at least in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Then have your standard matchmaking, but with a protected bracket still, because there's always going to be the people that maybe they have a disability, or maybe they're just never going to reach the level where they can compete with even the average Call of Duty player.
Yeah.
And I don't think they should be completely eliminated and alienated from the game. They should have the ability to play.
Yep.
And that's the sort of matchmaking that there was plenty of evidence for in previous Call of Duty games. Before Modern Warfare 2019, there was obviously protected bracket, because you could reverse boost very effectively and drop nukes and stuff in those lobbies.
Mm-hmm.
So I think protected bracket, and then outside of that protected bracket, have it fairly open, like some loose skill-based matchmaking. So the best of the best are unlikely to play against the worst of the worst, but every now and then there is going to be some overlap on that. That's just going to happen when it comes to something like that.
So what if you're an Activision executive and somebody proposes this to you, and you get your data team on it, and they make predictions for how it would impact player retention, and they come back and they say, this would boost the experience for a lot of like the hardcore players, but for most everybody else, they're not really connecting with it as much, and they're not playing as long. Like, what would you do if you were an Activision exec at that point? Would you tap your head and go, well, we could make 500 million this next quarter, or we can make 250 million and keep these people happy? Just seems like kind of a no-brainer there, I think.
Yeah. This brings me back to the more thing that I just have an issue with corporations in general, is they're looking for that quarterly profit. I think they should be weighing short-term versus long-term, and I think Call of Duty should be concerned, at least on the multiplayer side. Obviously Warzone's doing great still, They should be concerned that it's doing terrible on Twitch. It's not doing as good on YouTube anymore as it used to do, and people
Well,
are less and less interested
it was the
and
highest
pushing
selling.
back against them a lot.
It's the highest selling game of 2021 so far.
Highest selling, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm talking long term though. If you lose all of your really dedicated fans, I feel like those are the ones that sort of direct the flow of the game, and like more than ever these days, it's important to have games that are popular on Twitch and YouTube, and having influencers that actually enjoy playing it and want to be pushing it to their audiences. And again, the sales of Modern Warfare 2019, I think a lot of that has nothing to do with matchmaking, especially on the sales part. Retention part, yes, not sales. I think sales is primarily due to that nostalgia, the massive upgrade in graphics. Like, this is the best Call of Duty looking by far, and that's what sells to casuals.
I like your idea with the boot camp, but I would take it a step further. I would, instead of doing like the first 30 ranks, you could do it like total time played. So like give people like a full 48 hours in boot camp if they're, you know, if they want to choose that. I mean, I don't think I would probably choose that because that would be kind of boring for me. But you know, you can take it a step further and give people like plenty of time to catch their bearings with the game and get familiar with the controls and the mechanics and all that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another one big thing that I think has impacted people's perception of skill-based matchmaking more than the actual change to the algorithm itself is the disbanding lobbies. That's a compromise I'd be willing to accept right now. If they were to say, like, we're going to keep skill-based matchmaking the same, but we're going to stop disbanding lobbies, at least I could accept the matchmaking there, because then you can have more of a consistent experience across multiple games for those that are sticking in the lobby. And I think that's one of the reasons that people feel that it's such a massive jump from game to game, is because they're not playing in the same lobby against the same people as the previous match.
I really miss the old days. I don't play a lot of, like, first of all, I don't play a lot of MP public matches to begin with. It's me and Hector and Mike will play private matches, like game battle settings and stuff. But I still play pubs for probably like the first like month or two.
Okay.
Hey, what were you just talking about? I smoke too much weed sometimes.
Disbanding lobbies.
Okay, that. So like, I do miss the old days where like you would get in a lobby, it was extremely sweaty. You and your pals, you know, you beat this team one game, they beat you the next game, and then you go back and forth, shit talk, like that kind of not having that kind of experience does bum me out, and I do miss that. So I'm with you on that. I don't know why they do that. I mean, I'm sure it's because
I know exactly why they do that.
Okay, do tell.
It's all to do with their engagement optimized matchmaking system. They have to rebalance the lobbies every time, because lesser skilled players, they tend to just stick with the game over and over again. A lot of them, I noticed, they'll get stomped game after game after game, and you wonder, like, why aren't you just leaving the lobby and trying to find an easier one? But they don't care. They just stick with it, and they'll keep going 2 and 30 the whole time. So with this system, when that happens to them, the game is sort of giving them a helping hand and automatically forcing them into a different lobby that will give them a better experience to keep them around for longer.
Yeah, that makes sense on its face, huh?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's the case. At least it seems very likely that would be the case.
Okay. Did you have any other things that you would change?
Oh yeah, well, something that you touched on was just more incentive to grind ranked play. Like, give really good rewards that people really want to show off. Like, I noticed in Apex Legends, it's a big deal to be Apex Predator, and you see streamers grinding for Apex Predator. I'd like to see more of that, more incentive for people to want to do that in ranked play in Call of Duty, which means ranked play at launch, or at least within the first few weeks of launch, so that it's not too late when they launch it in January and people already lost interest and they're done with it. I'd like to see it come earlier and be pushed harder with more incentive and more rank. And that would be great for the CDL as well. It would push more people to be viewing CDL content if they're into that competitive experience.
Well, I think Sledgehammer, I think, has a pretty good track record when it comes to ranked, right? Like, a lot of people didn't like World War II, but I think everybody says that their rank system was like the best, right?
Yeah, it's the only one that showed an actual ELO rank, if I'm not mistaken. And that's what people love. They love to see where they stand, and they love to see themselves improving.
It sure does seem to be the case that different studios just have different viewpoints on this. It seems like Infinity Ward just doesn't seem to care about ranked at all. It seems like Treyarch sort of dabbles like a little bit, but not like how it used to be. And Sledgehammer, it seems, takes it probably the most seriously out of the 3 studios right now. But I think it's reasonable to infer from the behavior of these studios that when they look at their data, they just don't see enough people playing ranked to justify it. Now, Maven brought up a good point. He said these things take consistency. So if you want the ranked playlist sort of community to grow, then you have to stick with it, and it has to be sort of a consistent experience. And it's really hard for these ranked playlists or sort of like a ranked culture to spring up when there's not a lot of support from year to year. And you know, in the case of Infinity War, there's just none whatsoever besides a CDL playlist where you don't even have a rank. And I liked that playlist. It was a ton of fun, but you know, it would be nice to have some kind of a rank. So yeah, I think I agree with your points there.
And then, I think the only other thing I really mentioned is what I mentioned earlier with having the ability to choose your region from the onset. So there's at least, you have control over your connection experience, and you know that it's not going to be sacrificed in order to get a better skill match for you. Because to me, that's not acceptable for like a AAA shooter like this, where ping is so important. I think you should have some form of control over that for yourself.
Yeah, again, me being in Los Angeles, I've been playing the beta like solo queuing for a good portion of it, which was very tough. But my ping in almost every single lobby was like 31, 32 ping.
Yeah, so I was ranging from 70 to 110 roughly.
Okay, well, yeah, that's kind of rough. Oh. Okay, well, let me get to my next premise here.
Yeah, absolutely.
If skill-based matchmaking really killed games the way that the vocal Twitter minority thinks it does, then the 3 top played Xbox games currently wouldn't have it. They all do. I'm talking about Apex, Fortnite, and Warzone. And Cold War is still the 6th most played game on Xbox and the highest selling game of 2021. So Twitch viewership aside, YouTube engagement aside, to have a game be for Call of Duty to have the #1 game played on Xbox right now, and I don't know if PlayStation releases their top games publicly, so I don't know if we have that kind of data. And then you have the MP that's still the 6th most played game on Xbox. It's hard to say like, well, COD is dying when you see
agreed.
that. So you can crow all you want about hiding player counts, but COD is still very clearly a top player in the games industry and has been for over a decade now. Year after year, the same angry crowd prophesizes the death of COD, and it never, ever happens. I've watched it happen in comments and tweets and replies every single year. People are like, this is going to be the year. Battlefield's taking over. Titanfall's taking over. Fucking whatever's taking over.
That for years and still am.
What's that?
I've been laughing about that for years and I still am.
Right. It could change. I mean, like, and it will inevitably. Some other game will come along and compete with COD directly, but as of yet, it hasn't really happened. So the next premise, I'm almost done here. Much of the online skill-based, this is the one that's going to get probably kind of spicy, but much of the online skill-based matchmaking backlash and the larger conversations are driven by angry content creators that are bummed out that it takes longer to record gameplays, and they've convinced a ton of average or below average players who directly benefit from skill-based matchmaking that it's actually a bad thing. Many of these people, I'm talking about their followers, would get absolutely thrashed if they loosened skill-based matchmaking or removed it entirely. They have no idea that their experiences would be worse without it.
I think to some degree that I would agree with that. As far as it taking longer to get content for videos, I think I mentioned this earlier. It's easier to exploit than ever, I feel, with the matchmaking and pub stompers. A lot of them, at least, they're joining on bot accounts, or another thing you can do is you just consistently join on the person that performed the worst in every previous match. And if you continue to do that, after 2 or 3 matches, you're going to be down in those bot lobbies without having to have a second account. But for many of the big content creators, it's no problem to have a second PS4, second monitor, second account. Session join on that, and it's easier than ever to grab really easy gameplays for them for that. But as far as people using it as a scapegoat, I totally agree. I think people overstate the strength of skill-based matchmaking constantly and don't realize that they may actually be benefiting from it. Also, on average, I feel the people that are talking about the game and watching YouTubers and tip videos and really interacting online, they do tend to be above average players. So I don't necessarily agree that those people are the ones that are benefiting the most from it. I think many of them have noticed their own kill death ratios, for instance, drop significantly the moment Modern Warfare dropped, and that followed suit with Cold War.
So you say that it's easier than ever to get into these bot lobbies, but what you're describing to me as a process, that doesn't sound easy. That sounds like you have to put a ton of time and effort into, you know, creating a bot account and then joining off that bot account, or, you know, like if you're joining off of the players that did the worst the lobby before, you could do that as well in other CODs. If they were, you know, joinable, you could just do the same thing. So I don't understand how loosening skill-based matchmaking would get rid of that. I have no doubt that some content creators go to these incredibly fucking nerdy lengths to make themselves look like much better players than they are by abusing the matchmaking system to get into quote unquote bot lobbies. I'm sure that happens. But does it happen to a level that it should be relevant to Activision's analysis and decision-making process when tuning their matchmaking? No, I don't. I think we're talking about such like a minuscule part of the player pool, like a 0.0001% of all COD players are probably going to these lengths to do it. And, you know, it sucks that people exploit certain systems, but people have been exploiting whatever they can in gaming for as long as gaming has existed. And there's not going to be any perfect system where you can prevent that sort of thing from happening. Or maybe there is. I'm just not creative enough to pick up on that. I mean, like how endemic do you think it is to the YouTube? Like what percentage of YouTubers do you think are actually doing this?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't watch a lot of other YouTubers. I try to avoid it actively for the most part. So I stay original with as much content as possible. But I'm aware of a bunch that came out and specifically said they were joining bot accounts and reverse boosting. And to your point earlier, I think you mentioned that it's more difficult than it was in the past to like go to those lengths to create a bot account and stuff. That's a one-time thing to set that up. And a lot of people already have old consoles. Like I've got 3 PS4s just laying around from over the years. And it's way easier and faster than lobby shopping in the past. In the past, most people would just lobby shop in order to get into lower skilled lobbies. And that can be time consuming, constantly backing out and seeing who you're playing against. So I don't know if it necessarily is that difficult or as difficult as you're making it sound to get into those easier lobbies.
I'm not saying.
But yeah, again, I don't know how many are doing it.
Let me revise what I said. It's not necessarily difficult, but it is a somewhat time-consuming process, certainly more time-consuming than lobby shopping. And I have no idea how to guess how many content creators are doing this. I would guess that it's probably very small, like a very small percentage. It doesn't mean that maybe some of the top COD content creators aren't doing it. I'm sure maybe there's like 1 or 2 that are doing it. But the idea that content creators on the whole would prefer this system because it's exploitable, I think is kind of silly. Because it seems like the consensus is like most content creators want it gone because they're not doing those exploits and because it is harder to get gameplays. Maybe it takes them 3 hours to get a gameplay when during COD 4, you could get it in the first 30 minutes. Those lobbies were considerably easier.
Yeah. I'm talking about the ones that are really outspoken about it. They tend to be the ones that are reverse boosting, I feel, because they got so angry with the system that they're doing that. And then they are the ones that are pushing their audience to be so against skill-based matchmaking.
Well, but I mean, that just seems to me like the height of hypocrisy for some. Like, if there was a content creator that was actually exploiting the system and then complaining about skill-based matchmaking, that just
there's a few out there I've seen.
I mean, like if you're a developer too, you also don't want players like quitting a lot mid-game, which is what like a lot of content creators did and probably still do. You know, they're going for a gameplay. They want to get like at least like 30 and 3 or whatever. And, you know, if they die on a 5 kill streak, they just back out and then requeue and try to find something else. Like sometimes I rage quit, but for the most part, I'll stay in a game, even if I'm losing massively. But for those people to be complaining about skill-based matchmaking is just kind of funny to me. Because that's not good for the long-term health of a game. Like COD 4, you played COD 4, right?
Oh, yeah.
Lobbies disbanded constantly in that game, like constant, especially if you were playing with a good team. Also, just because everybody would quit out, like it would routinely happen that everybody on the other team would quit out when they were getting stomped out, and they were getting stomped out because the skill-based matchmaking, which that game did have, it just was the parameters were much wider. and they didn't have all the kind of data that they have now. They just got way better at pairing players up with each other. Oh,
yep.
Well, let me get to my last premise here. If a game is constantly matching a low-skilled player against high-skilled players, that is poor game design that will ultimately hurt the game's longevity. It would be idiotic to allow these kinds of parameters.
Okay. Couple of responses to that. I don't think skill-based matchmaking should be putting very low-skill players against very high-skill players, at least not consistently. And that's where I agree. Like, some form of skill-based matchmaking is important and even necessary. However, this is where I would also like to bring out Call of Duty's gameplay design. And another frustration that I've seen that came alongside the introduction of more strict skill-based or engagement-optimized matchmaking is it seems like the games themselves are doing so many different things to try and reduce that skill gap to help a lower skill player kill a higher skill player in a match. And COD's always done that. They've had death streaks and all those sorts of things. So I'd argue that if they are going to strengthen that skill-based matchmaking up and they're committed to that, they should at least try to make a slightly more competitive experience, try and eliminate some of those skill gap reducing elements, listen to the dedicated community a little bit more in helping drive a more competitive and just a better overall experience if you are being matched up with similarly skilled players. Because a big thing I noticed in Modern Warfare 2019 is since the skill gap was quite low in that game, if you were in higher skill lobbies, it wasn't really about like who's the most skilled player. It was who can cheese the mechanics the best, who can sound whore better than the other person and camp and wait in corners or use like the overpowered weapons all the time, like 725 and everything like that. It didn't really feel skill based, and that's why I don't feel like that strict skill based matchmaking fits with their current gameplay design and the philosophies they use.
And you think that this would make like the crowd of people that are complaining about skill-based matchmaking primarily, you think this would make them happier if they made a more competitive game? Like, let's say, get rid of some of the cheesy perks like tracker or some of the cheesy attachments that make it easier to get the game. I'm a little bit skeptical that these people would be like, you know what, now I'm happy. Like, even though there's skill-based matchmaking, it's more competitive. That, you know, like I think that there are a lot of players that just long for the days of COD. They have those memories of the COD 4 pub stomping lobbies, and they miss that shit. They want to they want to feel powerful again. They want to feel like Kal-El again, just like shooting lasers down on the whole fucking lobby. And they're never going to be happy until they get that back, which they never will, I think.
No, I don't think it would stop the complaints, not by any means, but I think it would at least make it for a more tolerable experience. And I think I would be toning my complaints down a little bit because I'm constantly looking at gameplay mechanics and how they should be improved, how they could be improved. And I'm always seeing things where it's like, why did you put that in? The only explanation is to help a lower skilled player kill a higher skilled player.
Oh, yeah.
And it's frustrating to see that when I'm also being matched against somewhat similarly skilled players at the same time. So
yeah,
I'm not saying it would solve the issue. I just think it would help alleviate the issue and help alleviate a lot of the concerns in the community, at least.
Yeah, that's why for me it's been the case for like the last like 4 or 5 CODs, with the exception of Black Ops 3, because I loved playing pubs in that game. I just really loved that game quite a bit. But all the other ones, played pubs for like a month, 2 months. And the way that we derive a sense of fun when playing the game is by playing with these competitive settings where you're not allowed to use certain guns and certain attachments and certain combinations of perks and certain equipment. And especially in a game type like S&D, it just makes the game a lot more fun. But if I was spending all my time playing pubs, I would totally understand why somebody who's like a veteran of the series would get upset. That being said, it's not like there hasn't been like really exploitable, overpowered mechanics in some of the older, especially in some of the older games like the M16 and COD 4, the grenades, martyrdom, 3 times nades, Modern Warfare 2, the ACR and the UMP. I mean, there's typically always been overpowered elements within each game. So
yeah, and overpowered elements are I think they're more acceptable when you have a wider skill range, because people that are really good will often get bored of that and they'll want to branch out and go knife only. Like I had a knife only account in COD 4 where I got to Prestige Master on knifing only because I was bored of just abusing the M16 constantly. And that is also where a lot of the fun comes out, is the variety in the gameplay experience. And that's what a lot of us are missing. But the main point is if they really insist on keeping the skill-based matchmaking and those days really are gone and they're dead, then they should also be evolving the gameplay to keep up with that. A lot of people wouldn't like it. I would prefer them going the other direction with just loosening skill-based matchmaking, but keeping these elements to help those lower skill players out. But yeah, if they insist on keeping it, then I think they need to change their gameplay design philosophy a little bit.
Yeah, like a player like me would benefit if they loosened skill-based matchmaking. Like I said, I solo queued the Vanguard beta both Saturday and Sunday, and it was fucking rough. Like it took me like 2 hours to warm up both days. Some of the games there were a couple games where I went negative, but for the most part I was sort of like barely going even. And then towards the end I warmed up a little bit and I was going a little bit more positive, but it was very grindy and difficult and oftentimes frustrating. And I'd be lying if I told you that I didn't wish that maybe it was just like a little bit looser so I could have more of those lobbies where I can feel like a good player, like I can feel like a strong player. But my argument when I say that skill-based matchmaking is good is looking outside of my own experience and looking at the median player and the lower than average median player. Their experience, and they represent a majority of players, like simply by definition of like these words and how they work. Their experience is on average going to be better, and therefore it is, quote unquote good. I'm not going to tell people that you're wrong for wanting easier lobbies. That's fine. I just wish that people would be more transparent about that. They use these terms like variety. I just wish there was more variety when it came to the players that I was playing that I'm playing against. Well, no, you don't. You don't want variety. Like it's the second you get matched up with like a team that's better than you and your team, you're probably going to quit out anyways. You're just going to look for those. What you're really saying when you say variety is you want to play against worse players. Do you agree with that or no?
I kind of see your point, but I really, like I said, I really do miss variety, and I'm being genuine when I say that. I feel like I can't use as much variety as I could in the past, and I don't know, deliberately tie a hand behind my back because I know I'm going to be better than the average player that I run into, and still find some success doing that. I found that to be really enjoyable back in the day, and you can't do that anymore. Sure, you could try doing that, but you're not going to have a good time. You're not going to be able to use those superior skills that you have because you're playing against similarly skilled players.
Yeah.
So I think there is a good argument for variety's sake, to some degree at least. And it's not just people that want to stomp on other people. They want to try different play styles by doing that, by tying their hands behind their back to see if they can still come out on top, to see if they can still succeed. And that's not very fun to do when you're playing against somebody that's roughly as good as you using the best gun and the best setup in the game, which is going to happen constantly in higher skilled lobbies.
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to call you a liar. I take you at your word when you say that. Like,
yeah, I miss going knife only. I miss dropping nukes.
I'm sure you're being honest about that. I know in my heart that there are a lot of people when they say variety, what they mean is I just want to fucking smash some Christmas noobs every day of the year. You know what lobby kind of felt like those old COD 4 lobbies recently was the capture event for Vanguard.
Yeah. Media was there.
I assume that's what happened. Like usually with these capture events, they separate media and influencers, and the influencer lobbies are just always brutal. But you and I ended up in some of a few of the same lobbies, and we were just feasting the whole time. It felt great. Of course that would be more fun to go back to that, but would that be the best for like the overall health of the game? No, I don't think so.
No, well, I agree with you there. And those aren't the types of players I'd want to be running into, at least not all the time. And that's part of the variety as well, is variety from lobby to lobby, not necessarily variety in what people use, but I kind of miss in the past when you search for a match, you never know what you're going to get when you get into that match. You might get an absolute bot lobby and go off and drop a nuke. More often than not, though, you'd have a lobby filled with primarily average players, maybe a couple good players, couple bad players mixed in, and then there's other lobbies that are just super competitive experiences. And I love all of those things. Like, I personally am not one of the types of people that would back away from a challenge. I love having a challenging lobby, but then it's also great that after that lobby's over and I finally win, or even lose. Usually if I lose, I want to try and go for that rematch, and that's where disbanding lobbies really suck, because I want that rematch against those people. I want the chance of searching for another lobby, and I don't know what's going to happen when I get into that. It could be really difficult, could be really easy. I miss that.
What do you think of like when we use terminology like sweats, like you get into a sweaty lobby? The whole that's one thing I saw in my mentions quite a bit when I make these kind of trolley posts where it's just like people say they don't want to be in these sweaty lobbies 24/7, matched up against some wannabe CDL players or whatever. But is it not the case that to median players or below median players, median level players, that you are the sweat in that situation, and that they similarly don't want to be matched up with, you know, quote unquote sweats or wannabe CDL players? So why is your experience when you say I don't want to be matched up against sweats? Well, what about these people that you want to stomp? Like over here, like they don't want the same thing. Like, don't they have valid desires just like you do as a COD player?
I think there's different people making different statements in that way. Like when I say sweat, I don't mean it in like a disparaging way. And when people call me a sweat, I take that as a compliment. And I think a lot of those people, their argument is they don't want to play sweats all the time. They're fine playing them sometime, but they'd rather see a little bit more freedom in their lobby, a little bit more room to breathe and try out different strategies and tactics that might not be ideal and different weapons. But then, of course, there are the other people that do just want to stomp bots all day, every day, and they never want to run into anybody as good as them.
All right.
I'm not on their side, that's for sure.
Okay. All right. I think I'm coming around to, because I was sort of making these like really broad generalizations that it was everybody just trying to pub stomp, and that variety was just sort of like a veiled term. Yeah. But I think maybe you've convinced me that there are like there probably are like a lot of players that genuinely do miss variety and they don't want to just stomp all the time, but they want like a mixture of the two. And it's hard to argue against that. Like I kind of wish that was the case as well. It would be a funner experience for me. I kind of miss that as well. I mean, all you got to do is just like solo queue and MP for a few hours, and you will probably be perspiring by the end of that. And that wasn't always the case, and it makes my experience, you know, somewhat diminished. But yeah, so I guess if there's one thing that you got me to come around to is that maybe don't dismiss the calls for variety outright. Although some people, I think they are fucking bullshitting when they.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, and that was the issue I had with your tweets. Like that was the only issue I had, is I really felt like people were getting defensive because they felt like you were generalizing and not really listening to their arguments, and they feel that they have more of a reasonable argument than the people that are just screaming that it needs to be gone and they just want to pub stomp every game. I think there's a lot of people out there that are more on the reasonable side, and they just would like to see some adjustment to it at least, and they just don't like it in its current state.
That being said, if my skill-based matchmaking take is enough to get you so mad that you're throwing like these wild ad homs at me in my mentions, you need to fucking touch grass. You need to go outside and experience life beyond the screen. And it's affecting you too much. So if we can move beyond the skill-based matchmaking, I don't know if you have time, but I wanted to maybe get your thoughts on Vanguard so far. I don't know how much of the beta you played, or I haven't watched any of your videos yet, but what did you think of the maps? What did you think of the guns, all that?
I'm actually feeling optimistic. I've seen a lot of people really negative about it. I'm feeling quite good about things. Like, again, outside of matchmaking, if we just put all that aside, because I expected that to be there. I like the maps overall. There's obviously several issues, most of which I feel are surface levels. So visibility, audio needs to be completely reworked. Spawns. Yeah, spawns are a big one. Those are definitely going to be changing. Even between now and the second weekend of the beta, I suspect we'll see some changes. And then between now and launch, I feel like they can work out a lot of those issues. And those were the only like really glaring issues that I had so far with the game.
Yeah. I thought the maps were dope. The Red Star I thought is a little boring. 6v6 TDM. I think it's a little bit better, like 10v10 or even 14v14 was fine on that map. On the contrary, I think that Hotel Royal should never be fucking 14v14. It's awful. It's not fun.
Yeah.
It's like a shipment with 24 players. It's just way too much. I think 10v10 is like maybe okay, but still pushing it because that map is not very big. But one map that they didn't get to play yet, and I think they're going to be able to play next weekend, was Eagle's Nest. I thought that was the best map out of the three, like a real simple three-lane map. I really love that map. What was the other one? The Gavutu. I thought
2v2.
that
Yeah, that's
one
my
was
favorite so far.
that one was interesting. It reminded me of like old COD formats where it's not like a standard 3-lane map, but you have like these 2 or 3 power positions that you go for. Like a lot of the COD 4 maps were like that, and I thought that was really fun. Getting in the top of boat and just the feeling that you get when you're up there and you can just like rain fire with the what the fuck is it? The death machine, which is something that. Yeah. What do you think about the fact that it's only 5 kills to get that thing?
Is it only 5?
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't use it at all throughout this weekend. That might be a little bit low. I don't know. At the same time, it's kind of easy to pick out when somebody's using one of that because there's so many like particle effects flying all over the place. So I don't think I got killed by that too often throughout the weekend. Just a few times here or there. I actually think I killed more people that were using it than killed me. So
it's a bit situational, but like if you can get to the top of boat with a death machine, you can kill a lot of people if they don't snipe you or something like that.
Yeah, I got a couple lines of sight I've already found though that can pick those people off really easily.
Really? Okay.
It's a big part of what I do as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, because you felt like God when you were up there.
Yeah.
When you said the footstep audio, I think I disagree with you. I like the quiet footsteps.
No, I'm not talking footstep. I agree with you on quiet footsteps for sure.
Oh, okay.
I don't want them to overtune that.
What did you mean with the audio stuff?
The audio, like the gunfire sounds really muffled. Somebody can be shooting 10 feet away from you, behind you, and not using a suppressor even, and you can't hear them, or it sounds like they're way on the other side of the map or something like that. I found it was really difficult to determine directional gunfire audio. Footsteps, I do think they could be tweaked up a little bit. So if somebody sprints literally right up behind you or next to you, you should hear them coming.
Maybe just a little bit. Yeah, I agree with you there, I think.
Yeah, I would much rather they lean more toward too quiet than too loud when it comes to footsteps, though.
Yeah, I'm selfish because I'm a Surge player, and like with loud footsteps, it just makes it really hard to be sneaky or creative. And it makes it kind of boring, I think. So that's why I thought it was good. The weapon balance, I think, is probably like the biggest problem right now. The STG was obviously incredible. The MP40 was really good. And then a lot of the other ARs were horrible. I don't know if you tried the burst one, but that's the worst burst rifle of any COD gun.
That has the slowest sprint out time that has ever existed in Call of Duty.
Literally?
By
really?
a pretty large margin.
Wow. Yeah. And it's not even that strong. I could understand if it was like a reliable one shot, but it's really not, or one burst, but it beyond like 10 feet. It was like I felt like I was shooting a pea shooter. That gun is terrible. Thompson was pretty good. The Sten were pretty good too.
I like all the SMGs quite a bit.
Yeah, the Garand I think I don't think very many people are going to use that. And the snipers felt like maybe like a little too slow. I don't know if you got a chance to play with them very much. I didn't even unlock the car.
Oh, the car is so much better. If you're into quick scoping, it's immediately you'll notice a difference. It's actually not that difficult. I'm not much of a sniper, but I had some pretty nice little streaks with the car, quick scoping, hard scoping, all that kind of stuff mixed in there. It's way better than the 3-line. Okay.
Well, good. Yeah. And and it's hard for me to snipe with a controller, and that's what I was using this weekend. So.
Okay. So you're gonna play PC this upcoming weekend?
Yeah, I think there's early access for PC starting on Thursday, right? I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that because like I don't hate playing with a controller, but I'm much more confident and comfortable with a mouse and keyboard.
Okay.
But I share your optimism. I thought the maps were really solid. I thought the game visually looked really gorgeous. Like it's a really, really, really pretty game. I didn't quite get what you were. I mean, I didn't quite experience what you were experiencing with the muffled gunfire, but I'll sort of pay attention for that this weekend and see if I can pick up on what you're talking about there. And then having a Pacific map come into Warzone, I think, is really exciting. I was afraid that they were going to do like a bombed out European theater, but the fact that they're taking it to a jungle is going to be, I think, I've very high hopes for that.
Yeah, I couldn't do another year of grays and browns in a Warzone.
Yeah, I want like, that's one thing I was worried too, because World War II was kind of like a brown, depressing color palette, and I was worried that this was going to be the same, but no, that was actually quite colorful maps, like different colors, like different color themes on each map, which was great. I thought that was great. So yeah, I think I share your optimism there.
Awesome. Good to hear.
Well, hey, listen, I appreciate you coming on. This has been a good conversation. I hope this has set an example for like how to have these kind of conversations without it devolving into like really ridiculous insults. I was not expecting like a blood sport match with you, and I appreciated your insights and your candor. And you did get me to change my mind on one thing. So there's that.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was a good conversation.
Yep. Good luck to you in the coming year, and I look forward to your high quality videos. If people want to find you, where can they find you? On Twitter, on Twitch, on YouTube, that sort of thing?
It's just TheXclusiveAce. That'll be on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube. So it's TheXclusiveAce.
No E in front of the exclusive.
Oh yeah, no E in front of exclusive. It's just starts with an X.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot, man. I hope you have a nice week. Take it easy.
You too. All right. See ya.